Well, the investigators are still working on some of the facts involving last night's incident, so I don't want to go too much into it. What I can tell you is this is sad and disappointing when you have a 16-year-old homicide victim and you have a 13-year-old suspect who actually turned 14 today. A 14-year-old should not be spending their birthday in a juvenile detention facility. I applaud the efforts of the Savannah Police Department members. Patrol officers responded to the area very quickly. Detectives were able to do a very thorough and detailed investigation last night and to uncover a lot of facts to be able to pull a preliminary case together this morning.
Good morning, Chief.
Good morning.
With this string of recent violence here in the city of Savannah, I know obviously you don't have a distinct answer of how we're going to solve it, but I mean, what are some things that maybe our community could be doing to try and prevent things like this happening, especially with such young children?
Well, you know, the incident last night, I mean, it points to a very disturbing fact. I mean, this is something that started out as a dispute between a 16 and a 13-year-old and ended in a 13-year-old shooting and killing a 16-year-old. I continue to say that this thing is bigger than what the police department can do by ourselves. We're not going to arrest ourselves out of a crime problem, but we continue to need that strong community support, that strong community partnership. We continue to talk to members of our community and let them know to call us when they believe things are going on in the community. There's nothing too small or insignificant for us to respond to. We had a situation a couple of weeks ago where we had somebody who the neighbors told us when we got there that they saw somebody who was hiding behind a tree, and they couldn't figure out why the person was hiding behind a tree. And a couple of seconds later, that resulted in a shootout in the middle of the street. We really wish somebody would have called us when they saw the person hiding behind a tree. Maybe we could have gotten out there faster and been able to prevent that shootout in the middle of the street. But I guess the best way to answer your question is we want to continue to build those strong partnerships and relationships with members of our community. Prevention, intervention, and enforcement is very important. Continue to get out there and see what we can do with our community members to prevent crime or intervene in those situations where people are already involved in criminal activity. And we are aggressively moving forward with enforcement actions in neighborhoods.
And I know Mayor Johnson touched on this, keeping guns out of the hands of these young kids. I mean, I know it's the gun owner's responsibility to be locking these out, but is there any, other way, do you think education, what can we do, for kids these age to not have their hands on these guns?
Well, you're absolutely right, and we're doing some thorough research to see where that gun came from last night that 13-year-old was in possession of. But it's just like the mayor said earlier this morning. Gun owners have to be responsible gun owners, and you're responsible for securing that weapon. We also need to take a look at where some of these other weapons that are showing up at our crime scenes are coming from. And we're doing some very thorough and exhaustive research on where those weapons are coming from. But we've got to do something about two things that are going on in this community. And it is firearms in the hands of people who should not have those firearms, i.e. using them to commit crimes, and people who are making very poor decisions with firearms that they have in their possessions.
My last question for you, Chief, is seeing a 13-year-old use a gun in this way, how concerning is that to you that this child knows how to use the gun properly?
Well, I can tell you that that was a very disturbing event out there last night, not just for the people who were involved in that event, but also for members of the Savannah Police Department. This is not something that we look forward to responding to, although the officers and the investigators did an outstanding job out there last night. You're still looking at a situation where we've got a 16-year-old who was shot and killed, and you got a 13-year-old suspect.
Thank you, Chief.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning.
Seems like she answered or asked a lot of my questions, but when we talk about crime in Savannah, a lot of it comes down to engaging and educating the community. So when these kinds of shootings happen, is there any way to kind of go back to the neighborhood, maybe from where they came from, and engage and talk to these people and figure out, what is the deeper problem here?
Well, absolutely, and we do that, and we continue to do that. We had a shooting on Saturday night in the 2500 block of East Mississippi. I was out there yesterday talking to some of the neighbors and going back and assisting with canvassing the neighborhood. And we always want to go back and make sure we talk to people for a couple of things to see if there's any additional information they can provide to us that maybe we missed during the initial conversations, but also to assure them that we're continuing to do the best job we can in keeping their neighborhood safe.
And when you talk to these community members, are there any insights in terms of what they think is a larger problem, or what keeps them awake at night regarding the crime issue?
Well, it's kind of the same thing that I've said, and we're kind of hearing the same thing from community members. We have too many guns in our community who are in the hands of people who should not be in possession of those weapons, and they're making very poor decisions that not only make our city look bad, but they're causing harm to sometimes innocent people who are involved in these situations.
To play off of that, Chief, innocent people being affected by this. We're hearing through the grapevine, I don't know if you can talk or speak to this at all, but a shooting a week ago yesterday, 39th and Ash might have involved an innocent bystander, and then Saturdays on Mississippi. Can you speak to that?
Well, what I can tell you is both of those cases are still being investigated by the investigators. I would think that it would probably be more appropriate for us to wait until I got a little bit more information from the investigators before I move forward in commenting on either one of those cases.
Understood. Thank you. And last thing for me, typically with last night's case, last night's shooting, we'd see that information coming out a little bit faster. Was there a reason why we just found out about this just before 10 o'clock this morning when it happened last night?
Well, there were some things that we had to work on and confirm last night. I can tell you the investigators were here late into the night last night doing some interviews and securing some search warrants. And this morning, once we were able to get some additional information from the investigators and we were able to confirm some information, we wanted to get the information out to the media and the community as soon as possible.
Thank you, sir.
Can you share with us what type of gun was used?
I don't even have that information right now.
Let me add something. Let me just add to the chief that ultimately the community, our community, we as Savannahans have to be sick enough to be sick enough. I often find that people, and through my travels through the communities, that people are often very quick to say them. And then when it happens to them, then it's why won't people step up? I've been at the crime scenes. I was out there Saturday, scene and at the hospital, and you see things and people say nothing, which amazes me. I mean, all these people around and you say, I ain't seen nothing. I'm minding my own business. And we don't recognize that for every individual who gets away, that they have the ability to do it again. That me saying something is actually in my best interest. Because if Chief is going around shooting people, and if we don't get Chief under control, then the fact is, Chief might victimize somebody else. We recognize it's a very small percentage, but those individuals need to be off the street. Again, I was blessed to grow up in a household that my mother would turn me in herself. I mean, but be very, very clear. I mean, she loved me, but she would have turned me in. My father would have handcuffed me, and it would have brought me in together. And so my appeal remains very clearly to mothers and grandmothers, fathers and uncles, that know that, you know, a lot of these young people, they live in foul. They're involved in grimy stuff. And you know it. And then when they're victimized from being in that life, then it's like, oh my gosh, we need to do something about this. We have to do something about this. No, we should have done something about it. And so my challenge remains, we have enough anonymous ways for people to be able to let police know what's going on. You know, and again, that's why I go to these scenes, because sometimes they'll talk to me and won't talk to them. If you know something, say something. I mean, I can understand people wanting to be safe, and I mean, we have ways that you don't ever have to say anything. But, you know, we have bullets don't have no names. And bullets are now flying through houses and flying through cars. It doesn't have to be somebody that you love before you decide to do something about it. The person that you turn in today might very well be the person that would have killed you or somebody you love tomorrow. And when Savannah understands that and gets sick enough of that, then that'll our crime issues, because again, our crime issues is very specific. We're down in property crimes, we're down in part 2 crimes, part 1 crimes, thank you. But it's still this person-to-person beef stuff. I mean, it is. And so I've told the chief, I mean, my unofficial advice was to him, I want my streets hot. I do. Because we have to send the very clear message that this behavior is unacceptable. And so if people are pulled over, if they are, checked, if warrants are served, whatever it is, if it's done in a way in accordance in law and done respectfully and with integrity and courtesy, I mean, we need to be able to have it. We are not going to tolerate it. And in the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I got to say about that. Thank y'all so much.